thought I did it right. Peter, is that microphone on? Because I got a green light. Hey, there we go. All right, brethren. Well, Jim Lewis has already caught me in my first mistake here. This is, see if I can get to it to fix it. This is not 2021. You know, I think I'd rather have this 2021. That's pre-COVID, wasn't it?
No. 2020 was COVID.
Okay, I'm glad we're here. Sorry. You know what? Man, it's only going to get worse, right? Bible geography. This is one of those courses where I just like it. It comes from a compound word. Geography does, of course. Ge being from the earth. Meek shall inherit the earth, and graphos, graphy, geography, to write about the earth, if you will. So science of geography covers the human side. You got culture, communications, communities, interaction, and the physical. Y'all don't have a book yet. You will. This is a book that Roger Campbell, Jim Lewis gave me this one in 2015. So I guess we were using it back then. And but this is the one Roger said we have on PDF, and also they've ordered some. And it's a simple book, and Peter's going to be running you off a syllabus, and basically we just follow this book for 8 weeks. We're going to just go down it. What I would like you to do, for you guys taking it for credit, and if you're here, man, take it for credit, you know, because you're not going to be asked to do. I'm not going to ask you to memorize Genesis or anything. But in the back of each one of these, there's some questions, and it would just be worth your while. And he's kind enough in the book to highlight the words you'd need to answer the question. So you ain't even got to be sharp. You can just find the ones that are bold, you know, and use those. So let's dive into this. Bible geography is about Bible lands. Now this is a topographical map, and I blowed this up because this is East Ridge. This is real close to where we are. This is the cemetery over here. I couldn't find where the church building is to put it up here. But the topography, you can see the 210 here. And as the lines go up, like here you have a high place. And so to be able to read a map is a pretty good thing. My wife cannot. And so it was a lot of fun in Los Angeles with me trying to get her to tell me where I needed to exit. And she couldn't even figure out which way to hold the map. So a little bit of map reading can go a long way. This is, every map has a scale. This is 1 to 24,000. It also has what is true north. And you got magnetic north, because you need a compass. That's how, you know, we've been navigating the world since we figured out how to use one. But it's not true, and it changes. If you'll notice, because with time, it's changing. And so it tells you right here, where is it? 1982. So in 1982, this was the magnetic north, and it tells you how many millimeters it's off. And each one of these squares, you see, is what we'd call a grid square, and that's a kilometer, 1,000 meters by 1,000 meters, and that's real important, like if you're plotting artillery. I don't know if any of you guys will be doing that, but we needed to know that. And you see these little lines, when they're way apart, you have sloping hills, and when they're real tight like this, you have more of a cliff-like. Scale's important. This kind of gives you an idea of where you are. Just overall map. It's a good thing to know. You know, around here, most of the time, and Hannah Clayton, she posted something like, I just can't figure out when somebody says east or west. Okay, come on. If it's east, it's coming from Flat Top Mountain. If it's west, it's coming from Cagle Mountain. You've lived there your whole life. You ought to figure out which side the sun comes up on. But a little bit of, around here, you know, if you can find Lookout Mountain, if you can get up on Missionary Ridge, you can see where Orchard Knob is. You can see the river. You got Raccoon Mountain. I mean, so but it changes. It changes when you get to places that don't have the things that you can see. Need to cover a few things for it. This right here is called boy, don't that figure. I added a slide here, but it obviously didn't take. Okay. This is what's called a rose. Thank you. A compass rose. And the new one I put on here had all the little, because you know you've got north, northeast, and east, northeast, and so forth. Got 12 different points on it to help you be a little truer. And the reason I put that on there is because you used to know that. Now we've got these things. Do you remember when garland was a big deal? I wanted one of these so bad. They were like $400. And then when you got your $150 cell phone a few years later, it already had it, you know, and you're like, boy, I am glad I didn't spend $400 on that garland. But this was a new invention when I was activated in 1991. Stood on the top of a tank out in the middle of the desert, and I said, I ain't never coming back out of here again. I'll never forget my tank commander had a big old chow in. He said, don't ever say never. And I thought, no, I ain't never coming. Well, less than 3 months later, we get home, somebody named Saddam Hussein went crazy and invaded some place I'd never heard of, and there we go. Well, it just so happened that this fellow right here, Saddam Hussein, didn't think America was even a threat, because he figured we'd get out there and we'd be able to find our way. The desert changes at night. It shifts. Winds blow. They don't even have the roads. They got to constantly, you might not know that, but they have to go sweep the roads because the desert will just, you know, cover them up. And so he thought, well, there's no way. What he didn't know, what he didn't expect, was GPS. And by the time we started all that, every unit had some type of global positioning system and knew where they were. And I just thought that was really, really neat. And boy, it kind of messed up his day. Well, if you notice, here is basically the lands that we're going to be talking about. This is the Mediterranean, and this is there a marker over here? I used to like to, no, there's not. Well, anyway, we'll just play like there is. No, it's okay, really. Man on a mission. Is that when, oh, look at that. We can play all day. Thank you, sir. Well, there's just one. If I steal this one, oh, we're in trouble. I used to love to do this with the kids, you know, when I was teaching Bible class, because I'm a visual guy. You know, if you'll show me something, I'm usually can catch on it. I hear, not all that great now, but I hear better than I read and understand. That's why I like to listen to things. I like audio books more than actually reading books, and because I pay attention more when I have to concentrate on it. But a little exercise I used to do is draw this little area. You can make it any shape you want. I mean, you can hardly see it on a map. But it's, and this would be Lake Hula, okay? It's dried up now. It's not really there anymore. And so that's not a big deal. And you can kind of make this any shape you make you happy with. And this would be Galilee, the Sea of Galilee. And and then you can make a bigger squiggly line down to a bigger body of water. Running out of juice. And what will this one be? Dead Sea, that's right. I know a guy that went over there, and the only thing he did the whole time he was there was he went and got into the Dead Sea. He wanted to see if he could float. And sure enough, he did. But anyway, and then over here on the coastline, you got this one little hump. What is that one little hump? And it actually kind of cuts back out here. Remember what this is? One of the first Bible stories I can remember really reading and starting to study was the prophet Elijah. And do you remember where he had his contest? Mount Carmel, that's it. Yeah, right there. And so it kind of sticks out. Boy, that's a terrible map. But anyway, if you can come over just a little bit north and a little bit west of the Dead Sea, the top of the Dead Sea, you'll come to Jerusalem. And that'll kind of give us everything that we need as far as staying staying in the confines of Palestine. And this, of course, is the big body of water known as the Mediterranean. Some place that, of all these places that I think I might be able to go one day, might be Mediterranean. I think you can stay on a ship and probably not get shot or something, you know, if I would like to do that. But that's just kind of a little map, and you can put that in your head. This is the Jordan River, of course, big, you know, always a big deal. And the thing about the Jordan River, it's not straight. It's a lot worse even than our rivers. It's a squiggly line. And one of the things I liked about having this is because when it comes to, we call these guys over here the Transjordanic tribes. This is where they will get they'll stay over here, remember? You had 2.5 tribes that stayed on this side, and they said, look, this is great land. This is where we want to, we can raise our cattle. It's perfect. But now listen, we're not trying to get out of war or anything. And remember, Moses, that's the context to be sure your sins will find you out. Because Moses tells them, okay, that's great. You can, you can have this, but you're going to go fight. And he says, and the thing he said was, if you don't, be sure your sins will find you out. And then, up in here is the tribes Dan and Issachar, and down here will be Judah. Benjamin is kind of like inside. And so if you can just kind of get this outline, keep that in your head, it'll help you a lot with Bible geography. Now, granted, we're going to expand out, and we'll talk about other things. For instance, this map, this is Saudi Arabia today, but this was just the desert, if you will. This is probably somewhere in here where Paul went when he's talking about the book of Galatians. You've got Mount Sinai here. 10 Commandments, of course, we think about coming from here. You've got the Red Sea with its 2 ears, which is the Suez and the Gulf of Aqaba. And, of course, Jerusalem and all of that. That's we've seen that a lot right now on news, aren't we? That's really, and, it always has been. But some of the key things that we'll need to remember, Baghdad, this is also the Caspian Sea. It is a salt sea, where in the Black Sea, though, is fresh water. Istanbul, does anybody know what that used to be? Constantinople. They used to be Christian, so to speak. And, of course, now they're not. Held out till about 1500. They lasted about 1,000 years longer than, of course, Rome. Of course, Greece. We think of all of this right here. The Apostle Paul and the missionary work he did, the 7 churches of Asia. Egypt, remember this area right here where Israel will settle? What's the name of that? The land of, remember? That's over here. But what they call this here? Goshen, yeah, Goshen. Because remember, they were shepherds. Joseph said, be sure and say this, because then they'll send you away from everybody, and we will be able to be separate, So that's just a blown-up picture of the Mediterranean. Now, remember Antioch. Antioch used to really mess me up because there's 2 of them. And that's the one, Antioch, Syria. And if you want to talk about an evangelistic congregation, they're the place, man. They've got Barnabas and Saul, and they're really into work. And so when you think about Antioch, the one in Syria is the one that we think of when it comes to mission work. They were really proponents of that. Of course, you've got Rome, and I don't know if we'll in this series or not whether we'll have all roads lead to Rome. It was the major place. Be important to know for you. You need this, okay? The Fertile Crescent looks like a big moon, and if you wanted to live, I mean seriously, live at all, that's where you were. Everything out in here is just desert. It was hard to cross. It was almost like having a wall here keeping you safe, because nobody could get across it, with any kind of military strength or anything. And you can see how this Fertile Crescent runs right down almost to Egypt. But if you're taking a land army and you want to go fight Egypt, this is where you're going to come through, okay? Jerusalem, the land of Canaan, we call it, is a freeway to these world empires. You've got Assyria up here. You're going to have the Babylonians over here. The Greeks are going to come over later, after biblical times. Plus, you've got the what you call the Iranians, which are the Persians. And so, I mean, it's just a whole lot of stuff going on here. But if you have this overall idea in your head, it will help you when you start talking about the Assyrians. Well, they're coming down, but the Assyrians got their own problems because the Babylonians are starting to kick around a little bit. And so now they're going to have to deal with this. Plus, ultimately, you've got the Medes and the Persians. And so you can see how all that and then there's always Egypt. Egypt's down here, and you know, Isaiah was reading what, chapter 30 last night, where Israel's wanting to you know, cut a deal with Egypt. They always felt like somehow Egypt was going to be a help for them. And remember what the Assyrian king tells them, you know, anybody leans on that's going to be like a broken reed. He's going to stab your hand. He can't help you. Of course, and they wouldn't. You know, Egyptians are going to be concerned about who when it comes to war? Egyptians, that's right. They're just glad you're there because that's something else he's got to go through before he gets there. All right, figures of speech and idioms. 1 Samuel 3 at verse 20 says, "And all of Israel from Dan even to Beersheba knew that Samuel was established to be a prophet of the Lord." Now, the Dan, way up here to the north, Beersheba all the way down in the south, and so that was just an idiom. You want to talk about the whole thing, this was it. We might say from New York to what? I was thinking Los Angeles. You want to get the whole thing. You just want the East Coast. I don't blame you. I'm happy here too.
That would be Bangor, Maine.
Oh, you don't go to Maine? Nobody lives in Maine. I mean, come on.
Say it.
You ever been to Maine?
Stop in New York, you've missed like 14 states.
Why you always got to be such a pain?
I'm making sure you're right.
What is, no, I ain't never been right. Thank you, though. What is this? Oh, that's a clicker? Oh, a pointer. Okay. Thank you, sir. Which one of those do I push?
Try one, see what happens.
Yeah, no, and it melts down, right?
Right there.
Okay, that's the thing that, and then I can advance it from here. Will it work? No. Okay. Oh, okay. That's a little bitty light, ain't it? Well, anyway, Dan to Beersheba, just another way of saying the whole kit and caboodle. Now, notice Jonah. I always, you know, if you know a little bit about the geography, Jonah is getting on a boat. He's supposed to be going to Nineveh, but instead he sails towards Tarshish, which is the complete opposite direction. Tarshish, of course, is in Spain. And I tell you something else. You know, I don't need to be chasing rabbits. This course is long enough, right? But you got the Parthians. You know, you're going to have Carthage, this huge city that's going to be fighting. You know, all that's just pre-set up for the time of Christ and of all those wars that take place. And what does the Bible say about Jesus? That in the fullness of time, you know, when the time was right, Christ was born. All that's done, and you have this Pax Romana, this period of peace, when, you know, Caesar Augustus, Octavius will be emperor, and everything was perfect. Language, everybody was speaking Greek, just like today if you fly commercial airline, the pilots all have to know English. Back in those days, you better know Greek or you wasn't going to do much commerce, so everybody spoke Greek. You could get around because the Roman Navy pretty much takes over about, what, 500 BC from Carthage. Carthage had been your naval power, but then the Romans take it. And so the seas are pretty safe. The roads are pretty safe. The roads are better. The Romans are building roads, and man, they could build some roads. But notice where he goes. He sails towards Spain. He's supposed to be going to Nineveh. Well, you know, ultimately he makes it there. Also, false teaching. If we know a little bit about Bible geography, can help us when you got guys like John Hagee who makes his living on Zionism. Did he die yet? He's still alive? No, I don't. I know his son's doing things now. Notice the coronavirus is the dress rehearsal for the New World Order. Oh, my. Well, I don't know about all that, but this is kind of interesting. When you study the kingdoms of Daniel chapter 2, they're kind of laid out, and we've understood them as being the head of gold, which was Nebuchadnezzar. You've got silver being the Medo-Persian Empire, of which Cyrus, of course, is going to be a part of. Then you've got that bronze empire from Greece. And then, of course, the iron and clay is that Roman Empire that can expand even further because they don't really need a huge army to control the whole world because they're just not going to beat you up if you'll work with them. They're going to come in and they're going to, you know, show you their military strength, but they're going to say, hey, look, you know, you pay your taxes and be good little. We don't care what God you worship, whatever, as long as you, you know, burn some incense to the Caesar every now and then, and we'll let you be. And so they controlled so much. And, you know, brethren, I probably told you this before. It's one of the events in my life I'd give anything to go back and redo. I was a young man. I was in Germany. I had a German friend. And he drove me up to this hilltop, middle of nowhere. Well, not really in the middle of nowhere. There's nowhere in Germany. Everybody's there. I mean, it's a pretty crowded place. And we're standing there, and he's showing me these stones in the ground, and he tells me this is the farthest the Romans ever got, conquering, Germania, And I'm like, well, that's pretty great. That didn't mean anything to me then, How I would love to be able to go back and to see that. I mean, that's amazing. The Romans were that far up into Germany. If you sail across the English Channel, you can see how far they got up into England. Plus, they're running Italy. Plus, they're having to deal with Egypt, and they're dealing with all of the Persian problems and stuff. It is amazing the size of the Roman Empire. In fact, the later emperor said, we just can't do this, so let's divide it up. And that's why you had the Byzantium, the Eastern Empire, of course, in Rome, and the Western Christian Empire in Byzantium. They just kind of divided up and kind of lived at peace with each other there for a while. But notice what happens when you let some folks get with it. We've got the 10 toes, and I know you can't see that real well. It's kind of dark. But you got 10 toes now that Hagee and all these guys want to use, and they've got it figured out. Greece, Spain, Austria, Prussia, Portugal, Italy, France. And when you had the European Union, oh, it's over, man. There's them 10 nations we've been waiting on. Of course, all of that's just in their mind. Hey, I blew it up. And so you can see the European Union there and it's falling apart. England said, we're not going to play. But Daniel chapter 7 is just a recapitulation, if you will, of Daniel chapter 2, and you have those same kingdoms represented, and there's not 14 toes or anything. You have those 4 kingdoms that are mentioned just like the statue. And so anyway, if you know a little bit about Bible geography, that can help you. And also, notice we have marked here, that would be the Assyrian Empire. Since 845 BC, now that's been a day or two. Jim Lewis had just been born when the Assyrians there had Jim Wake back there. 845 BC, Assyria had ruled the world beginning with Tiglath-Pileser. And they're really mean people. And we don't know a whole lot about them because they weren't into art. They were into war. They were into conquering. And they were good at it. And real cruel, though, from what I understand. And they would move people around. They would capture an area. And if you want to break somebody's spirit, you take them out of their location, move them somewhere else, and basically make them dependent upon the government. We do that today, don't we? Right here in the United States, yeah. But that's how they did it. That's one of the ways that you get some of the problems that Israel will run into. But here you have Babylon. In 625, Nabopolassar rebels against Assyria in Babylon, and it takes him a while because the Assyrians are not just going to roll over. But he has a son that you're probably maybe more familiar with. His name is Nebuchadnezzar. And he defeats and takes Nineveh, the Assyrian capital, in 612 BC. And of course, they become the king. And now look here, we're going to come to a head. 605, Nebuchadnezzar. Now notice where Necho's at. Pharaoh Necho at Carchemish, and becomes the superpower of the ancient world. The Egyptians are up here. I mean, this is a knockdown, drag out. This is for control of it all. And that's the way it is, with all those guys over there. Always jockeying for position to see who's going to be in control. Nebuchadnezzar, remember, is Nabopolassar's son. Notice the Nebu in the front of their name. Of course, the god that they worship, they carried that into their name. And so then here we have a kind of a breakdown of that. The Babylonian kingdom, you have the Persian Medium kingdom, and then the Arabian desert, which, nobody really wanted much of that. It wasn't anything there for you to get or do. And so that's the breakdown of those ancient kingdoms. The Persian Empire, of course, from 539 to 332 BC, just absolutely huge and had it all. Nabopolassar's son was Nebuchadnezzar. He was the general in charge of his father's armies that defeated the Assyrians and Egyptians at Carchemish. He just put everybody to flight. Besieged and took Jerusalem in 606 and 605. His father died and he had to return to take his throne, or he might have finished it right then. In 609, you have the beginning of the 70 years of captivity. 609, that first wave would have been the princes, the really elite children that the king wants to take back first, not only that to kind of chill some people out, but also to serve in his court. And so there's a second wave in 597. Ezekiel is one of that group. That's the largest population move in 597. And remember, they sent them there at the river, rivers of Babylon, with a song that we sing. That's where Ezekiel gets his vision. Now, that's one of the books of your Bible. But Ezekiel writes that. He's in captivity. He's in another place, as well as Daniel. And then you have Zechariah, the last king. Remember Zechariah? What's the last thing Zechariah will see? His sons put to death in front of him. I used to deal with that a little bit easier. Better, I guess you could say. I just assumed, being a king is an old man. Well, first of all, kings didn't live to be very old back in those days. But second of all, comes to find out he's about, you put how long he reigned with when he started reigning and his age. He's only in his early 40s when those two boys are. So what does that say about them boys? Teenagers maybe, at best. I always thought, it's a terrible thing. But Zechariah goes to Babylon. He's the last wave. 582, Nebuzaradan takes another bunch. That's a deportation we don't talk much about. You might want to write that down. Just look at it sometime. Do a little research on your own. But we generally say the three deportations, the three major. This is only 745 people, but that's still a pretty good amount of folks. Take a look at that sometime. Then we have the returns. If you're studying the Gospel Advocate series, the next quarter we're going to be studying Ezra and Nehemiah. The first return takes place 70 years from when Daniel was taken, and that's under Zerubbabel. You had in 458, that's a pretty good haul now. Look at the distance. That's 538 to 458. What is that, 80 years? It's a long time. Before Ezra goes and, starts teaching them the law, and then you have Nehemiah going, what is that, 14 years later. Of course, Ezra will still be doing some work as well. But brethren, when I was, I'm going the wrong way. How did I go back? There I am. I didn't know much about that right there when I was a young Christian. I had no idea about that right there. Because when I would read the Valley of Dry Bones as I had been taught, that's showing that Israel is going to come back from the dead, if you will. God is going to raise that land up. And when you start reading those passages, and John Haggai and those guys, they know how to spin it. Israel is going to be restored. Can't you see those kingdom promises? And as a young person and biblically illiterate, I'm looking at that and I'm going, man, that's what that says. So that must be true. Well, it is true. And it was true, right? It has been restored. The kingdom was, was established in the first century with Jesus, but Israel was restored. They were brought back. And that happened about 450 years before Jesus was born. I didn't know that. And boy, when I finally was able to learn that, it made me feel so much better about listening to guys like Hagee and all the other ones who've made so much out of the premillennialism and all the prophecies that talk about the establishment of the kingdom. And now, because I knew enough to know that John said he's in the kingdom, but I couldn't explain those Old Testament passages. But now, we know a little bit of Bible geography. That helps. If you had a book, you don't. I do. Well, some of you do. Bible Lands Overview. First of all, it talks about Mount Ararat. What's significant about Mount Ararat? Ark crashed, right? Yeah, that's right. It's where the ark landed, and notice he says that goes northwest point. That'd be the northernmost point. Now we're talking about just the Bible lands. That ain't where the earth stops. But that's where we're going to stop, and all the way to Mount Sinai, which is down in the Red Sea. And he said that's about 2,200 miles from east to west and 900 miles from north to south, or about 2/3 the size of the continental United States. That's what we're going to be talking about. A strip of land suitable for farming and building cities extends from the Persian Gulf north. We call that fertile crescent. Then it turns and goes south to Egypt called the Fertile Crescent. It's got the Tigris and the Euphrates. That was so much a part of so many American lives now that we never, I remember when, well, how do you like that? Who is it? Obviously, they didn't know I was going to be in class earlier, did they? What was I saying? No, yes. I did not, Kuwait, I didn't know that was a thing. And all of a sudden it had been invaded, and then I'm told, like, that's where all our oil comes from. I'm like, well, we need oil. Got to change the oil in my car. So, we need some of that. But I didn't know anything about that. Well, all of a sudden, we learned a lot about the Tigris and the Euphrates. And if you know the Tigris and the Euphrates, of course, we're talking the Garden of Eden and all that stuff. It's really interesting how all that ties in. But the Tigris and the Euphrates, that strip of area there is called Mesopotamia. Anybody want to take a shot at what Mesopotamia means? The land. There you go. You must have notes from last time, or is it up there? Okay, I was going to say, Mount Ararat. You can see it way up there next to the Caspian Sea. That's where the Bible says that the Ark of Noah came to rest. Mount Sinai, boy, about as far down as you can get before you run into the Red Sea. So that's the area we're going to be spanning. This, of course, is a picture of the Persian Empire. If you are doing the Gospel Advocate series, you probably just went through Esther not long ago. And how long did it take them to get a horse and rider from one side of that bad boy to the other? Remember how long? They could do it in 7 days. Isn't that amazing? 7 days. As far as you can go. 127 provinces. And they could get from here to here in a week. They had an elaborate system, kind of like we had in the West, the Pony Express. I don't know if they, Arabians, they were faster than our old Mustangs that we broke from probably stole from the Indians, right? But they could do it in a week. And just think, 127 provinces, all those different languages. And so every one of those laws that Artaxerxes was coming up with, and then, of course, had to rescind the laws. You couldn't rescind it, but you had to give the Jews the ability to defend themselves. So all those had to be translated into all those different languages and sent all over the face there. Pretty interesting, huh? Powerful empire. This was the empire that put 1 million men, it's estimated, they didn't have real good roll-keeping skills, but over like 1 million men in the field to go take over Greece, and it just didn't work out for them. Lost their navy, which really put them in a bind, and then, of course, y'all all heard of Thermopylae and the 300 and all that stuff, right? Well, and that's probably when Esther was, looking to be queen. When all that was going on, he was probably having a party trying to get all these people on board for this big war he was going to go on, and it just didn't work out. But anyway, the Bible Lands overview, we just looked at that. Let's take a look now at the Fertile Crescent. That's shooting up from the Persian Gulf, of course, down over to Goshen. Isn't that something? That's Sinai. They tried a long time ago to build a thing through there and couldn't get it done. Finally got it done, and who owned it? You remember? United States. Yeah. What did we do? Gave it back, right? That's amazing, isn't it? Here's a map of ancient Mesopotamia. And remember, we said Mesopotamia is simply the land between the rivers. That's what that means. Large bodies of water, the Mediterranean Sea. One of the great things to remember about it, and too bad the Roman centurion that was with Paul didn't pay a little bit more attention. Instead of walking up there, I could just point, couldn't I? Wonder what I did with that. There we go. You will have this book, but we're going to go ahead and go through it because of the time. But notice, bad weather and rough seas from November to February, through February, so November, December, January, 4 months, made shipping extremely dangerous in ancient times. Therefore, shipping was largely restricted to other months of the year. Now, it's going to be 8 weeks from now before we talk about Corinth. But one of the reasons Corinth was such a popular place was it's called, you ever heard of Peloponnesia? It's just a little bit of growth, just barely connected to the mainland of Greece. And them fellas was so sharp You know, you talking about not wanting to sail November, December, January. Say, what do we do? Well, let's just drag that bad boy across the land. And so that's what they did. They dug a little causeway, put the stones out and everything, and they'd put out logs. They'd empty out the cargo, put it on, you know, as much as they could, put it on animals, and have those animals go as they were dragging that ship from one side to the other. And then they could sail right on to Rome and not have to worry about being shipwrecked because they were in, you know, the Aegean Sea and the Adriatic, a lot calmer than being out there in the big old Mediterranean. So the Mediterranean Sea, the Persian Gulf, and the Caspian Sea. Largest body of water surrounded by land in the world is the Caspian Sea. It's over 700 miles from top to bottom. And think how important God, think how smart God is. I think that all the time. Every time I take a breath, I think, how did it get, well, anyway, we won't get into all that. But those bodies of water are huge and have separated folks from killing each other at a greater rate than they would have had they not been there. The Alps, you know, I mean, poor old, what was his name, Hannibal, lost most of his elephants and about half his army crossing that sucker, but he still got over there and whooped some head. But Alps, mountains, you know, have really helped to keep people from killing each other even more than they would. So those three bodies of water, let's look at them real quick. Mediterranean Sea, of course, big body of water, goes through the, do y'all remember how this place came about? This little, it's called Gibraltar, right here. Do y'all remember how that came about? Hercules. Hercules needed to get over here, and he couldn't get through, so he smashed through that mountain. Y'all need to get up on your truth here. But that was the inland, of course. It would put you in the ocean, and there you have the Portugal, which I don't know beans about Portugal, but I know one thing. At one time, they were highly influential. You know how I know that? Because if you live in Brazil, guess what you speak? Yeah, if you go to Disney World, you know what they're saying over the intercom? Por favor, all that stuff. It's Portuguese. Yeah, they established, you know, sea. They were great. And that's something that we'll talk more about. And I would love to spend just a whole class. But right here you have the Phoenicians. And the Phoenicians were, in fact, the Phoenicians are the ones who come over here and settle Carthage, make Carthage, and they're all about, they're not war people. They don't even have an army. Their thing is money and commerce. Man, they can sell and they can trade. And, you know, it's one of the problems with Hannibal and them. Before his time, they didn't have an army at all. They would hire armies. And, of course, that can run into a problem when the army you hired comes home and ain't happy with the way things are going. So they ended up getting one. But the Phoenicians, the reason we have an alphabet today, they started keeping calculations of how many chickens was on that ship they sent wherever. So they needed a way to record that. And so it's pretty interesting when you put it all together. But they, too, were great salesmen, great maritime folks. Here, of course, the Persian Gulf and the Red Sea. Persian Gulf, of course, 20 miles long and 3 times larger than Lake Superior. Isn't that amazing? 520 miles long. Excuse me, I thought 20 miles. That don't sound right. And then, of course, the Caspian Sea. Look who all is here, folks. You've got Turkey. Boy, they're known for their great peace, right? Ukraine, Russia, what is that, Kazakhstan. Imagine if these two bodies of water were not here. The death and destruction and mayhem that would be going on. Remember, Caspian salt, the other one's fresh water. Also, let's see, the major rivers, the Tigris, the Euphrates, also the Orontes River, 255 miles north of the boundary of Canaan. We'll talk about that here in just a moment. Am I going the wrong way? I sure am. I didn't think that looked right. Here, of course, is the Red Sea. Remember the 2 ears that stick off of it, Suez, Aqaba. That's something, just kind of put that to memory. Also, what have I got here? Why am I showing that? The Orontes River. Is that why I'm doing that? I've got it on there for a reason. And I do not know what that reason is. Well, that's just there, right here, the Orontes River. Hopefully you can see it sticking out there. The Nile River, it's the largest river in the world. Can you imagine that? Look at that. It is 100 miles longer than the Amazon. I don't know about y'all, but if I lived down there in Africa, I'd be digging me some river. I ain't going to let them have that 100-mile advantage over 100 miles. But, boy, aren't those huge? And the Nile, of course, it's all the history that's up and down that thing. Look at all these different places that you think of and have made an impact, even to us. What's also the interesting thing about the Nile River? You remember? Flow. Yeah, that's exactly right. Somebody held the world upside down, didn't they? Yeah, it goes south to north, where most of the time, most rivers of that size, you know, go the other way. Ramesses III. What do you think of when you think of Ramesses? Can't help but think of the Bible, right? That, you know, he was thought to have been around that time, although I think now they've proven that's probably not the case. Heliopolis. Think of the Temple of Luxor. I always think of Luxor. You know why? I stayed in that hotel one time. It was a nursing conference. Don't y'all get after me. I didn't bet anything. But the elevators run sideways. That's the only thing I remember. That, and they had a great Mexican restaurant in the bottom of it. But all kinds of, and what is all that stuff that you see? What is that mostly representing? All the monuments and everything. What is it? Dead people. Dead people. It's about, you talking about a religious group. And they still are uncovering things over there. They don't even, it's amazing the elaborate system and money that went into these major projects. Some have been lost, you know, for 1,000 years, covered up by the sand. Now they're finding them. And it was all dedicated to religious. And so, boy, God needed to get, you know, Israel out of there as quick as he could, because they were just flat eat up with pagan philosophy and, I guess, just idols. Think about the mountains. We've already talked about that. Mount Ararat. Also, kingdoms, cities, and land. Well, we got the Lebanon Mountains and Mount Hermon. The Lebanon Mountains, and then you have the anti-Lebanon Mountains, which are to the west of those. These are pretty important even today, because when you see that right there, can you see that? What is that? Beirut. Do you remember Beirut when... You won't, Carla. You're too young. 1983. Yeah, Ronald Reagan was president. We had a battleship, but we also lost 200 and can't remember the exact number. Dude driving a deuce and a half or something equivalent, full of explosives, drove it into the Marine barracks in Beirut. And we've been trying to get back in there and help them for years, and I do not understand.
People got killed, 240 injured.
Is what now?
9 people got killed.
That's all?
240 were injured.
Wow, I thought there were more deaths than that. Is that right? Is that right? Well, I'm glad to hear that. I thought the casualty rate was significantly more than that. Brethren, it's just my business, and I'm not a politician, but I just don't think we ought to have boots on the ground in a place that don't have no more respect for human life and God of heaven than that area. It's just enough to make angels weep. All right, you got the two big mountain ranges there. They're pretty important. And then Mount Hermon. Mount Hermon is also, I mean, you can see, just look at that. Isn't that amazing? I'm always amazed. You know, when you go out to California sometimes, or you're out west, and you run across in these mountains, they still have snow on them, and it's like 80 degrees where you are, and you're looking, and you're going like, that's got to be pretty high. You know, that's got to be up there. That's just absolutely gorgeous, but once again, it's a tremendous barrier. I think of barriers every time I drive here, because there's Lookout Mountain keeps me from being here much quicker, and 24, and the river, and just, you know, we have a lot of barriers around here too, don't we? Kingdoms, cities, and lands. We've talked quite a bit about the kingdoms already. Mesopotamia and Egypt. There's a color bar. It's kind of hard to see that, though. Political map of Mesopotamia. You can see the orange here was the Median Empire. What do we think of Media? What do you think of? We call it the Medo-Persian Empire. And they take over after who? Do you remember? First, the head of gold was who? Nebuchadnezzar. Chaldeans. Babylon, right? And then after them comes the Medes and the Persians, because, well, there's a bunch of Medes, you know, already there. And so you have what's called the Medo-Persian Empire, and then that, of course, is taking over. Do you remember that real fast animal, the cheetah, that is just flying? His feet ain't even touching the ground because he's so fast. Who's that the representation of? Alexander the Great. And then the last kingdom, of course, I can't even see. The Lydian kingdom, green over here. Remember what happens with, boy, and we'll get there. Remember what happens when Alexander dies. You have 4 generals who basically divide it up, and then that starts a whole new thing of stuff we got to keep up with. As far as the Ptolemies in Egypt, you have the Seleucids. You've got these 4 generals, and Greece and stuff kind of eases out of it because we're thinking more of Egypt and it's, you know, for Bible geography than we are. Is that clock right? Yes. Okay. Well, I'm not sure how many slides we've got left. Let's go through this real quick. Kingdom of Israel. This is great if you can kind of remember that. Your Edomites, your Moabites, your Ammonites, all those ites. Because they're going to be perpetual thorns in the flesh of Israel if you know where they're coming from. Edom, who was Edom kin to? You remember, who were they the descendants of? Esau, that's right, named after a mountain too, you know, that God refers to. And that's one of the things when you're reading the prophets, you're reading Elijah, listen to me, Elijah didn't write. You're reading Isaiah, so forth. Sometimes he'll use a mountain. And he's talking about, what's the mountain that he would use? Ow, I speak. What is the mountain that he would use for the Edomites? Starts with an S. Seir, I guess how you say it, S-E-I-R. And what is he saying with that? He's talking about Edomites. Jerusalem, he'll call it Ariel. And so a little bit of Bible geography kind of helps us with that. The Moabites and the Ammonites, where do we learn about the origin of their dads, granddads? Genesis, remember what happens? Abraham had a nephew, his name was, who looked at the well-watered plains and said, hey, let's live down there. And the next thing you know, he's been run out of Dodge. He goes, hangs out in the cave with his daughter, and then you have the beginning of the Ammonites and the Moabites, all cousins. And boy, they've been killing one another ever since. The Philistines were never a nation, but they were kind of like the Greeks in that they had great cities, and these cities would get together and, of course, go fight the other guys. Up above Israel, you have the Phoenician states, and they're important. Tyre, Sidon. Of course, we talked about Beirut. But those are significant. They're trading cities. They are mentioned in Scripture. Some of the greatest, I think, proofs of the Bible's inspiration is found talking about Tyre, because the Bible even says that Nebuchadnezzar is not going to get it. He's not going to get a payday for his army. He's going to get to Tyre, and he's going to really, he breaks them walls down, gets in there, and everybody's gone. And they're on that little island out there. You're like, oh man, what are we going to do now? We don't do nothing. He goes home. Alexander the Great, though, comes by, and he doesn't let that stop him. He says, okay, so he takes the old city of Tyre and pushes it out in the ocean and makes him a causeway. Look at Google Earth sometime, and you can see that even today, how that took place. And, of course, he actually takes Tyre, those Phoenician states. Just kind of keep especially the Ammonites, Moabites, Edomites. You're just going to see them over and over again. Of course, you know the Philistines. But you will see them over and over again in Bible literature. There's the questions that will be there. And so we had a map, and so I was going to hand you out one of these, but I didn't. So there it is. The rivers there, we're not going to spend too much time with those. You need to turn it this way. But real quick, let's look. Okay, wrong one. That'll be the next one. All right, that's it. Let's take a break. If you got any questions, wait till Peter gets out here and you can let him have it.